A frail 73-year-old female billionaire sits alone in a wheelchair, her luxurious dinner growing cold. She thinks it's just another lonely Christmas until the door opens. A black single father and his young daughter walk in. Almost immediately the little girl goes straight to the woman's table and whispers, "No one should be alone at Christmas." She places a handmade card into the woman's shaking hands, igniting a warmth she hasn't felt in years, unaware that this innocent moment will change all three of their lives forever. Before we dive in, where are you from? Drop a comment below and tell me, and don't forget to hype and subscribe for more heartwarming stories every day. Snow fell steadily over Chicago that Christmas night, thick white flakes blurring the lights along Michigan Avenue and turning the city into something quieter, softer, almost forgiving. Inside the Silver Maple, one of the most expensive restaurants in the city, warmth wrapped around every table. Candlelight flickered against polished wood, laughter rose and fell in waves. Families leaned close, passing plates, clinking glasses, children's voices cutting through the low hum of music. It was the kind of place designed to make people feel together. At table 17, Evelyn Hartman sat alone. She was 73, her silver hair pulled neatly back, her posture still elegant despite the wheelchair beneath her. An expensive navy jacket draped over her shoulders, tailored perfectly, yet hanging a little looser than it used to. In front of her was a pristine Christmas dinner, roasted duck, glazed vegetables, untouched bread, ordered an hour ago. The food had gone cold, though no one had bothered to clear it. Evelyn hadn't noticed. Her gaze was fixed on the empty chair across from her, as if someone might still arrive late, breathless with apologies. No one ever did anymore. Her right hand rested on the table near her wine glass, trembling in small, uncontrollable movements. She wrapped her left hand around it, trying to steady it the way doctors had taught her, but the shaking pushed through anyway, subtle yet relentless. When she finally lifted the glass, a few drops spilled onto the white tablecloth. She froze, embarrassed, then slowly set it back down, pretending nothing had happened. Across the room, a waiter glanced over and quickly looked away, giving her privacy she hadn't asked for. 5 years earlier, Evelyn would have walked into this restaurant on her own. 5 years earlier, she wouldn't have worried about a shaking hand or whether strangers were watching. 5 years earlier, Richard, her husband, would have been sitting across from her, complaining about the cold and stealing food from her plate. The memory came without warning, sharp and vivid, dragging her back to the night everything changed. The icy road outside the city, the headlights flashing too close, the sound of metal folding in on itself. She remembered waking up in a hospital bed, unable to feel her legs, a doctor's careful voice explaining words she didn't yet understand, and then another voice telling her Richard hadn't survived the crash. Now her legs lay still beneath the table, useless, hidden by the elegant fall of fabric. She shifted slightly in the wheelchair, the movement stiff and practiced, and felt the familiar ache in her lower back. Around her, a family at the next table laughed loudly. A father cut food into small pieces for his daughter while the mother leaned in to kiss his cheek. The child squealed, dropping a fork, and everyone laughed again. Evelyn turned her head away, staring instead at the soft glow of the Christmas tree near the entrance. Her chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with her heart. Her phone sat beside her plate, screen dark. She picked it up, hoping without reason, then unlocked it. One message sent early that morning. "Merry Christmas, Mom. Sorry we can't make it this year. Next year for sure." It was from her son Andrew, somewhere overseas with his own family, his own life. She stared at the words until they blurred, then locked the phone and slid it back onto the table. Next year had become a phrase with very little meaning. When the waiter returned to ask if she wanted dessert, Evelyn shook her head, the movement slow. "Just the check," she said. Her voice sounded thinner than she expected, worn down by a day without conversation. The waiter hesitated, smiling politely, then nodded and walked away. Evelyn reached into her purse, her fingers brushing against something familiar. She pulled it out carefully, a simple gold wedding band, worn smooth over decades. She turned it between her trembling fingers, the metal catching the light. 41 years of marriage. 41 years of building an empire, of meetings and flights and late nights, of choosing boardrooms over birthdays. For what? To sit alone on Christmas night, surrounded by strangers who were too busy loving their own families to notice her quiet unraveling. The tears came suddenly, hot, uncontrollable. She pressed a napkin to her eyes, shoulders tightening as she tried to breathe through it. She told herself she was being foolish, dramatic, that she had everything anyone could want. Money, power, a name that still opened doors, but none of it could steady her hands. None of it could fill the empty chair. None of it could make this room feel less cold. Evelyn lowered the napkin slowly, blinking hard, and stared at her untouched plate. The food looked perfect, it tasted like nothing. Outside, the snow kept falling, covering the city in white, erasing tracks, softening edges. Inside at table 17, a woman who had built everything found herself with nothing she could hold on to, sitting very still in her wheelchair, trying not to let the world see how much she was breaking. The waiter was still a few steps away with the check when Evelyn felt a presence beside her table, something small but insistent, close enough to pull her attention out of her thoughts. She lowered the napkin from her face and looked up, expecting a staff member, maybe someone asking politely if she needed assistance. Instead, she found herself staring into a pair of wide, curious brown eyes. The little girl couldn't have been more than 6. Her dark hair was parted into neat braids that had loosened during the night, a few strands sticking to her forehead from melted snow. She wore a purple coat that looked a size too small, the sleeves ending just above her wrists, and her cheeks were flushed red from the cold outside. "Are you okay?" the girl asked. Her voice was soft but direct, without hesitation, without fear. Evelyn froze. People didn't ask her that anymore. They asked about her health, her company, her schedule. They spoke around her, not to her. She blinked once, caught off guard, then forced a small smile. "I'm fine, sweetheart," she said, though her voice betrayed her, thin and unsteady. The girl didn't smile back. She studied Evelyn's face with the seriousness of someone much older, as if weighing that answer carefully. "You're crying," the girl said, not accusing, just stating a fact. "Why are you sad? It's Christmas." Before Evelyn could respond, a man hurried over from the entrance, his long stride slowing when he realized what his daughter had done. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing worn jeans and a dark jacket that had clearly seen better winters. His face carried the exhaustion of someone who worked too hard and slept too little, eyes shadowed, jaw tight with constant responsibility. "Lily, hey," he said gently, placing a hand on her shoulder. "We don't bother people like that." He looked at Evelyn, embarrassed. "I'm really sorry, ma'am. She didn't mean." "It's all right," Evelyn heard herself say, surprising even herself. The words came out before she could stop them. The man hesitated, clearly torn between apologizing again and pulling his daughter away. Lily, however, didn't move. She took a small step closer to the table, tilting her head. "You're by yourself," she said. "That's why you're sad. You're alone." The sentence landed harder than anything Evelyn had felt all night. In 5 simple words, this child had named the truth she had been avoiding for years. Evelyn's throat tightened, and she looked away for a moment, ashamed of how exposed she suddenly felt. "Lily," the man said again, firmer this time, though his voice remained kind. "We're leaving." But Lily shook her head, slipping her hand into the pocket of her coat. She pulled out something wrapped loosely in crumpled tissue paper and held it out toward Evelyn with both hands, as if offering something fragile. "I made this," she said. "It was for my daddy, but I think you need it more." Evelyn stared at the small bundle, her hands trembling even more as she reached for it. The man's expression shifted, confusion flickering across his face. "Lily, that's," he started, then stopped himself. Evelyn unwrapped the tissue slowly. Inside was a handmade Christmas card, folded unevenly, edges slightly bent. On the front, Lily had drawn 3 stick figures holding hands, one tall, one small, and one in the middle shaded lightly, almost faded. Inside, written in careful, uneven letters, were the words, "Family is love, Merry Christmas." Evelyn felt something break open in her chest, her vision blurred as tears filled her eyes again, but this time she didn't try to hide them. "It's beautiful," she whispered. The man cleared his throat. "She made that this morning," he said quietly. "The middle person, that's supposed to be her mom. My wife passed away 2 years ago." Evelyn looked up at him then, really looked at him, and saw the grief etched into his face, familiar and heavy. It was the kind of loss that didn't fade, only settled deeper with time. "I'm so sorry," she said, the words raw but sincere. "I'm Evelyn." "Marcus," he replied. "Marcus Reed, and this is Lily." Lily smiled then, satisfied, as if her mission had been completed. "Nobody should be alone on Christmas," she repeated, her voice firm. "My mom said that." Marcus exhaled slowly, rubbing his hand over his face. "She did," he said softly. "And she's right." Evelyn glanced around the restaurant. The families, the laughter, the warmth she'd felt shut out from moments ago now felt unbearably close. She looked back at Marcus, then at Lily, standing there so sure of herself, so unafraid to step into a stranger's sadness. Would you sit with me?" Evelyn asked, surprising herself again. "I have far too much food, and I'd like the company." Marcus's eyes widened slightly. He opened his mouth to refuse, pride and uncertainty fighting across his face. "We couldn't," he said. "This place is." "Please," Evelyn said, her voice steadier now. "It would mean a lot to me." Lily's face lit up instantly. "Can we, Daddy, please?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, then back at Evelyn, then around at the elegant room that clearly wasn't meant for people like them. He hesitated, then nodded once. "Okay," he said. "Thank you." Lily climbed eagerly into the chair across from Evelyn, as if she belonged there, swinging her legs, smiling without reservation. Marcus sat more carefully, perching on the edge of his seat, visibly uncomfortable in his worn clothes among the polished surroundings. Evelyn signaled the waiter with a small wave of her trembling hand. "Could we have 2 more menus?" she asked. "And maybe warm this up." The waiter nodded quickly, already smiling at the sight of the child. Lily leaned forward, studying Evelyn closely. "Your hands shake," she said. Evelyn stiffened for a second, then nodded. "They do." Lily reached across the table and gently placed her small hand over Evelyn's, steady and warm. "That's okay," she said. "My grandma's hands shake too, she's still nice." Something in Evelyn's chest loosened then, a knot she hadn't realized she was holding. She felt it deeply, the simple acceptance in Lily's words, the unfiltered kindness that asked for nothing in return. Across the table, Marcus watched the interaction silently, his eyes softening. In that moment, 3 strangers sat together in the middle of a crowded restaurant, bound not by blood or money, but by a quiet understanding. Without realizing it, Evelyn felt the night begin to shift. The cold inside her eased just enough for warmth to slip in, carried by a child who saw loneliness for what it was and chose, without hesitation, to sit with it instead of turning away. The plates returned warm, steam rising softly as the waiter set them down, careful not to crowd the small table now filled with 3 people who had not expected to be together that night. Evelyn watched his hands as he adjusted the silverware, noticing how steady they were, how effortless the movements looked. When he left, the space felt quieter, more intimate, like the world had narrowed just enough to make room for something new. Lily immediately reached for a fry from Marcus's plate, grinning when he pretended to scold her, and the sound of her laughter cut through Evelyn in a way she hadn't felt in years. It startled her how quickly the silence she had been drowning in disappeared. Marcus sat stiffly at first, shoulders squared, eyes darting around the restaurant, as if expecting someone to tell them they didn't belong there. He lowered his voice. "Thank you again," he said. "You really didn't have to do this." Evelyn shook her head, the motion slow but deliberate. "I wanted to," she replied. She reached for her fork, her hand trembling as it always did. The metal clinked softly against the plate when she missed her grip. Lily noticed immediately. Without asking, she slid Evelyn's fork a little closer to the edge of the plate, positioning it so Evelyn could grasp it more easily. The gesture was small, instinctive, and it hit Marcus harder than he expected. He looked away for a moment, swallowing. "You don't have to help me," Evelyn said gently, though there was no annoyance in her voice. Lily looked up at her, completely serious. "It's okay," she said. "That's what families do." The word lingered in the air longer than anyone expected. Evelyn's chest tightened, but this time the feeling wasn't painful. She managed a smile. "Then I suppose we're doing it right," she said. Marcus let out a quiet breath, something between a laugh and a sigh. As they began to eat, the awkwardness softened. Lily talked constantly, filling the spaces that might have felt uncomfortable otherwise. She explained that she loved Christmas lights more than presents, that her favorite color was purple because it reminded her of magic, and that she hated peas but would eat them if they were covered in enough ketchup. Evelyn listened closely, nodding, laughing softly at the right moments. It felt strange, how natural it was, how easily she slipped into the role of someone being included instead of observed. "So," Evelyn said after a moment, her voice calm but curious, "how did you two end up here tonight?" Marcus hesitated, glancing at Lily before answering. "Honestly," he said, lowering his voice again, "we were looking for a diner down the street. It's our tradition. Christmas dinner out, just the two of us." Lily nodded enthusiastically. "They have pancakes shaped like snowmen," she added. Marcus smiled despite himself. "We must have mixed up the address," he continued. "By the time we realized, Lily wanted to look at the lights, and then, well, here we are." He gestured vaguely at the room, his discomfort returning for a moment. Evelyn understood more than he realized. "Sometimes," she said quietly, "you end up exactly where you're supposed to be." Marcus studied her face, unsure what to say, and Lily beamed as if the statement confirmed something she already knew. The food slowly disappeared from the plates. Evelyn ate less than she normally would have liked, her hands tiring quickly, but she didn't mind. The effort felt worth it. Lily helped when she could, passing napkins, nudging plates, doing everything with a sense of purpose that made Evelyn feel less self-conscious and more human. Eventually Marcus spoke again, his voice softer now. "My wife," he said, stopping himself briefly. "Her name was Angela." Lily looked up, unbothered by the mention, and continued eating. "She used to love places like this," Marcus continued. "Not because of the food, but because she liked watching people. She said you could tell a lot about a city by how families ate together." He smiled faintly, then looked down at his plate. "She passed 2 years ago. Cancer." "I'm sorry," Evelyn said, the words steady, practiced, but this time they carried weight. "My husband died in an accident," she added after a pause. 5 years ago." Marcus looked up, surprised, and nodded slowly. "I figured," he said. "Not the details. Just the way you sit, the way you look at the empty chair." Evelyn exhaled, relieved not to have to explain. Lily finished her food and climbed onto her knees on the chair, leaning closer to Evelyn. "Do you want to hear a song?" she asked suddenly. Evelyn blinked. "A song?" Lily nodded. "Mommy used to sing it when people were sad." Before Marcus could stop her, Lily began to sing, her voice soft and a little off-key, filling the small space between them. It wasn't loud enough to draw attention at first, just enough to be felt. Evelyn closed her eyes without realizing it, the sound wrapping around her, smoothing edges she hadn't known were sharp. Marcus joined in quietly, his deeper voice grounding Lily's lighter one. A few heads turned, someone smiled. Someone else stopped talking. When the song ended, there was a brief pause, then gentle applause from a nearby table. Lily blushed, delighted. Evelyn wiped her eyes, laughing softly. "That," she said, her voice thick, "was the best Christmas present I've had in years." Marcus shook his head, embarrassed. "She does that," he said. "No warning." "I like it," Evelyn replied. "Very much." As the evening stretched on, conversation flowed more easily. Evelyn found herself sharing stories she hadn't spoken aloud in a long time, about growing up with very little, about building her company piece by piece, about the accident that took her husband and her ability to walk. She didn't dwell on the details, but she didn't hide them either. Marcus listened without interruption, his respect clear in the way he held himself, in the way he never rushed her words. He shared his own story too, about working with his hands, about trying to be both parents at once, about the fear that crept in late at night when Lily was asleep and the world felt too heavy. By the time the plates were cleared, something had shifted completely. The restaurant still buzzed around them, but their table felt separate, anchored. When the waiter returned with the check, Evelyn reached for it automatically. Marcus opened his mouth to protest, then closed it, reading the room, understanding that this wasn't about money. Lily slid her chair closer to Evelyn's wheelchair and leaned her head against Evelyn's arm, completely at ease. For the first time that night, Evelyn didn't feel like she was waiting for something to end. She felt like she was in the middle of something that had just begun. Around them, Christmas continued as it always did, but at one small table in the Silver Maple, 3 strangers sat together, warmed not by candles or food, but by the quiet realization that family could be formed in moments like this, chosen not out of obligation, but out of kindness, presence, and the simple decision to stay. The penthouse lights were already on when Evelyn Hartman returned home. The city of Chicago spread out beneath her like a glittering map of everything she had built and everything she had lost. The driver helped her inside, wished her a polite Merry Christmas, and the door closed behind him with a soft final click. The silence rushed in immediately. No laughter, no small footsteps, no off-key singing. Just the low hum of the heating system and the distant sound of traffic far below. Evelyn wheeled herself toward the window, her reflection faint in the glass, an older woman framed by luxury and loneliness in equal measure. She should have been exhausted. The evening had taken more out of her than she wanted to admit. Her hands shook more than usual, the tremor sharp now, aggravated by fatigue. She tried to remove her coat, fumbling with the buttons until frustration tightened her jaw. Eventually she gave up and let the coat hang loosely around her shoulders as she moved deeper into the apartment. Every surface gleamed. Everything was exactly where it belonged, and none of it mattered. On the dining table lay the Christmas centerpiece her staff had arranged earlier that day, untouched. Evelyn passed it without looking. Her mind was still at the Silver Maple, still at that small table, still hearing Lily's voice, still seeing the way Marcus had hesitated before sitting down, pride warring with necessity. She reached for a glass of water in the kitchen, her hand shaking badly enough that she had to use both hands to keep it from spilling. A few drops still splashed onto the counter. She stared at them longer than necessary, anger flickering briefly across her face, not at the mess but at the reminder that her body no longer obeyed her. Sleep didn't come. It never did on nights like this. Evelyn sat in her study, the city lights reflecting off framed awards and photographs lining the walls, deals closed, buildings opened, smiling handshakes with people whose names she barely remembered. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an old photo album, flipping through pages she had memorized long ago. Her husband's smile, her son as a child, holidays she had missed, moments she had postponed. Then, without warning, her thoughts shifted back to Marcus, to the way he watched Lily eat before taking a bite himself, to the way his shoulders stayed tense even when he smiled, as if the world had taught him not to relax for too long. By 6 in the morning, Evelyn had made a decision. She reached for her phone, her fingers trembling as she scrolled to a familiar contact. "Margaret," she said, when her assistant answered, voice sharp despite the hour, "I need you to look into someone for me." Full background. Quietly, "I want everything by noon." She ended the call before questions could follow. The file arrived faster than Evelyn expected. She opened it with steady focus, the tremor in her hands ignored through sheer force of will. Marcus Reed, 36, widowed, 1 child. The pages painted a picture that made her chest tighten. Medical debt stacked high from his wife's cancer treatment. Insurance caps reached too soon. Out-of-pocket costs that never should have existed. He had sold their home to keep up, downsized to a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood the city preferred not to think about. His income fluctuated month to month. Carpentry jobs, repairs, custom work when he could get it. Then came the employment section. Evelyn's jaw set as she read line after line. 23 applications to construction firms, restoration companies, development groups, 12 interviews. 3 offers, all 3 rescinded within days. The reasons were always polite, always vague, budget constraints. Position re-evaluated. Not the right cultural fit. The phrase made her scoff aloud. Cultural fit was the cleanest way the system had found to say you don't belong here. She flipped to the portfolio section. Photographs of restored staircases, custom woodwork, historic homes brought back to life with care and precision. The craftsmanship was undeniable. He wasn't just skilled, he was thoughtful. He researched original techniques, sourced period-accurate materials, treated buildings like they had stories worth preserving. One piece had even been featured briefly in a local exhibit, though no contract followed. No opportunity stuck. Evelyn leaned back in her chair, anger building slowly, steadily, like pressure behind her ribs. This wasn't about talent. It never had been. Marcus Reed hadn't failed the system. The system had failed him, and it had done so quietly, efficiently, without ever having to explain itself. She thought of Lily's small hand on hers, the way she had offered help without hesitation, without shame. The contrast made her stomach turn. Evelyn turned to the financial summary again. The debt figure stared back at her, obscene in its size given the reason behind it. A man punished for trying to save his wife's life. A child growing up with less because compassion came with a price tag. She closed the folder slowly, her hands shaking harder now, not from age alone, but from fury. This was not a one-off. This was a pattern she recognized too well. She had benefited from it once, long ago, when the doors had opened for her just wide enough to slip through. Too many others were never given that chance. She picked up the phone again, this time dialing a number she hadn't called in years. "I want to start a new division," she said, when the line connected. "Historic restoration, real craftsmanship. I want it built from the ground up." There was confusion on the other end. Questions about cost, about approval, about timing. Evelyn didn't entertain them. "I'll handle the board," she said. "Just do what I asked." As the sun rose over the city, Evelyn wheeled herself back toward the window. The tremor in her hands hadn't eased. Her legs remained still, unchanged. But something inside her had shifted. For the first time in years, she felt the pull of purpose again, sharp and undeniable. Marcus Reed didn't know it yet. Lily didn't know it. But the night that had begun with loneliness was about to ripple outward into something far larger. Evelyn stared out at the waking city, her reflection steady despite the shaking hands, and whispered to herself. Marcus Reed stood outside the Hartman penthouse, the next afternoon, longer than he needed to, adjusting the collar of the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have paint stains on it. It was clean, pressed as best as he could manage with a cheap iron, but still looked out of place against the glass and steel tower rising above him. Lily squeezed his hand, bouncing slightly on her toes, her yellow dress bright against the gray winter day. "Daddy," she whispered, eyes wide, "is this where rich people live?" Marcus exhaled through his nose. "Yeah, baby," he said. "Something like that." The door opened before he could knock again. Evelyn Hartman sat just inside, framed by a wide entryway that looked more like a hotel lobby than a home. She wore a soft gray sweater instead of the sharp jacket from the night before, her hair pulled back the same careful way. A cane rested against her chair, though she remained seated, hands folded neatly in her lap, trembling faintly. "I'm glad you came," she said, her voice warm, steady. Marcus nodded. "Thank you for inviting us." Lily didn't wait. She stepped inside, gasping softly as she took in the space. "Wow," she breathed. "It's like a castle." Evelyn smiled at that, something genuine breaking through her composed exterior. The penthouse was silent in a way Marcus wasn't used to. No background noise, no neighbors arguing, no television left on for company. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, sunlight reflecting off snow-covered rooftops far below. Art lined the walls, expensive and impersonal. Lily wandered toward a grand piano in the corner, running her fingers along the keys without pressing them. "Can I play?" she asked. Evelyn looked to Marcus, then nodded. "Of course, just be gentle." As Lily began tapping out random notes, filling the room with uneven music, Evelyn motioned for Marcus to follow her toward the sitting area. Coffee and pastries were already laid out, untouched. "I'm going to be direct," Evelyn said once they were seated. Marcus stiffened instinctively. "I looked into your background." His shoulders tightened, his mind racing through worst-case scenarios. "I see," he said carefully. "I hope that's okay," she continued, watching his reaction closely. I needed to be sure. Marcus nodded slowly. I understand. Evelyn reached for a folder on the table, her hand shaking noticeably as she slid it toward him. I saw your work, she said. Your portfolio. Your references. You're extraordinarily talented. Marcus blinked, caught off guard. Compliments weren't something he was used to receiving from people like her. Thank you, he said, unsure what else to add. I also saw the jobs you applied for, she continued. 23 of them. And the reasons they gave for turning you away. Her mouth tightened. They weren't turning you down because you aren't capable. They were turning you down because the system wasn't built for you. Marcus looked down at his hands. I don't have a degree, he said quietly. I know that's a problem. It's not, Evelyn replied sharply. It's an excuse. She leaned forward slightly. I'm starting a new division at Hartman Industries, historic restoration and preservation. I need someone to lead it. Marcus looked up slowly, certain he'd misheard. Lead it? He repeated. Yes, she said. Director level, full authority over projects, budget and team building. For a moment the room felt too quiet. Lily's piano playing echoed faintly behind them. Marcus shook his head before she could continue. Mrs. Hartman, he said, I appreciate this, I really do, but I can't accept charity. Evelyn's expression didn't change. Good, she said, because I'm not offering you charity. I'm offering you a job. Marcus let out a short, disbelieving laugh. You don't even know if I can do corporate work, he said. I'm a carpenter. I work with my hands. You've been running your own business for years, Evelyn replied. You manage clients' timelines, budgets and people. You do it without an assistant, without a safety net. You've learned by doing. That matters more than any degree. She slid the folder closer. This is the offer. Marcus hesitated, then opened it. His breath caught as he read. Salary numbers that didn't feel real. Full health insurance. Benefits. An education fund for Lily. He looked up, shaken. This is too much, he said. It's fair, Evelyn countered. It's market rate for the responsibility I'm asking you to take on. He closed the folder, pushing it back toward her. I don't belong in your world, he said quietly. People like me don't end up in offices like this. Evelyn met his gaze without flinching. People like you built this world, she said. You just weren't invited to sit at the table. She paused, then added, you showed up for a stranger on Christmas night. You're raising your daughter alone with more integrity than most executives I know. And you've been told no 23 times and you kept going. That's not luck, that's character. Marcus swallowed hard. Why? He asked. Why me? Evelyn glanced toward Lily, now humming to herself at the piano. Because your daughter reminded me that nobody should be alone, she said. And because I've spent too many years rewarding the wrong things. I don't want to do that anymore. Her voice softened but didn't weaken. This isn't about saving you, Marcus. It's about giving you what you've already earned. Lily appeared beside them then, tugging on Marcus's sleeve. Daddy, she whispered loudly. Are you in trouble? He pulled her onto his lap, smiling despite the tightness in his chest. No, baby, he said. I think we're being offered something. Lily turned to Evelyn. Are you going to make my daddy happy? Evelyn smiled gently. I hope so. Lily nodded, satisfied. Okay, she said. Marcus looked back at the folder, then at Evelyn, then at his daughter. The fear was still there, heavy and real, but so was something else, something he hadn't felt in a long time. Possibility. I don't know how to say yes to something like this, he admitted. Evelyn's lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Just say yes, she said. We'll figure out the rest together. After a long moment, Marcus nodded. Yes, he said quietly. Evelyn exhaled, a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, and extended her trembling hand. Marcus took it carefully. In that simple gesture, something settled. The decision was made, and for the first time since that snowy night, it felt like the future was no longer something to fear but something to step toward. Marcus Reed had been inside the Hartman Industries headquarters for less than 10 minutes when he realized how little this world was designed for people like him. The lobby alone felt like a test. Marble floors polished to a mirror shine, security guards who watched him a second longer than necessary, men and women in tailored suits moving past him without eye contact, as if momentum itself made them important. He adjusted his jacket, the same one he'd worn to church funerals and court dates, and reminded himself to breathe. This wasn't a mistake. Evelyn had been clear, he belonged here. The elevator doors opened onto the executive floor, and everything became quieter, sharper. Glass walls, muted colors, a kind of controlled calm that felt expensive. Evelyn was waiting when he stepped out, standing with the help of her cane instead of her wheelchair, her posture rigid with effort. Marcus noticed immediately. "You don't have to stand," he said, instinctively stepping forward. Evelyn waved him off. "Today, I do," she replied. There was something in her voice that made it clear this wasn't about pride. This was preparation. They walked together down the corridor, her cane tapping softly against the floor, each step deliberate. Marcus could feel eyes on them through half-open doors, the subtle pause in conversations as people registered what they were seeing. A black man in a senior executive hallway, with her. He didn't need anyone to say it out loud. The message was already there. The conference room doors closed behind them with a heavy click. 6 people sat around the table, all of them dressed in variations of the same expensive uniform. At the head sat Victor Lang, Chief Financial Officer, his silver hair immaculate, his expression neutral in the way men learn to make it when they believe they already hold the upper hand. To his right sat Helen Moore, Head of Development, eyes sharp, posture perfect, hands folded, as if she were already preparing a case. The room went quiet. "Good morning," Evelyn said, taking her seat slowly. Marcus stood beside her chair, unsure where to go. "Everyone," Evelyn continued. "This is Marcus Reed. He'll be leading our new historic restoration and preservation division." The silence that followed wasn't confusion. It was resistance. Victor was the first to speak. "Leading," he repeated, drawing the word out. "Could you clarify what you mean by that, Evelyn?" "I mean exactly what I said," she replied. "Director-level authority, full oversight of projects, budgets, and hiring." Helen leaned back slightly, her eyes moving over Marcus in a way that felt more like evaluation than curiosity. "And what qualifications does Mr. Reed have for a role of this scale?" she asked. Marcus felt his chest tighten, but he kept his face still. Evelyn answered before he could. 15 years of hands-on restoration experience. Independent project management. Proven results. Victor glanced down at the folder in front of him, then back up. "No degree," he said flatly. "No corporate management background. No experience overseeing multi-million-dollar budgets." He looked directly at Marcus for the first time. "Is that correct, Mr. Reed?" Marcus swallowed. "I've managed projects," he said carefully. "Just not in a corporate setting." Victor smiled, thin and humorless. "That's what I thought." Evelyn's grip tightened on her cane. "You're missing the point," she said. "Marcus understands craftsmanship. He understands the work itself. That's exactly what this division needs." Helen tilted her head. "With respect," she said, "understanding the work is not the same as understanding the responsibility. One mistake could cost this company millions. This isn't a charity program." The word hung in the air longer than it needed to. Marcus felt heat rise in his face, anger and shame colliding in his chest. He opened his mouth to speak, then stopped himself. This wasn't his fight. Not yet. Evelyn leaned forward. "No," she said slowly, "it's not charity. It's leadership, something this company has been lacking lately." Victor's eyes flicked to her hands, still trembling despite her effort to steady them. He noticed. Everyone did. "Evelyn," he said, lowering his voice as if speaking to someone fragile, "you've been through a lot. Your health, the accident. We're all concerned. Maybe this isn't the best time to be making such emotional decisions." The room went still. Marcus felt something snap inside him, but before he could react, Evelyn straightened, pain flashing briefly across her face before being replaced by steel. "Say what you mean," she said. "I'm saying," Victor continued carefully, "that this company needs stability. Predictability, not experiments." He gestured toward Marcus without looking at him. "And certainly not risks we don't need to take." Evelyn's voice dropped. "The only risk here is continuing to reward credentials over competence," she said. "This man has been rejected 23 times because people like you decided he didn't fit your idea of leadership. And look where that's gotten us." Helen's lips pressed into a thin line. "This is inappropriate," she said. You're letting personal feelings cloud your judgment. Marcus felt the weight of the room closing in on him. He shifted his stance slightly, aware of how alone he looked standing there, aware of how easy it would be for them to dismantle him piece by piece without ever raising their voices. Victor leaned back in his chair. I propose, he said, that we table this appointment. Mr. Reed can work under Helen's department for 6 months, learn the ropes, prove himself. No, Evelyn said immediately. That defeats the purpose. Victor raised an eyebrow. Does it? Or does it protect the company from unnecessary exposure? He paused. You can't just push this through because you want to feel good about it. That did it. Evelyn stood, slowly, painfully, her cane shaking as she put weight on it. This is my company, she said, her voice carrying. And I will not be lectured about my motivations. Victor stood as well. For now, he replied quietly, but the board will have questions, and if your judgment is compromised. Enough, Evelyn snapped. This meeting is over. Helen started to protest, but Evelyn cut her off. Anyone who has a problem with Marcus Reed's appointment can take it up with me directly, or they can find another place to work. The room erupted into murmurs as chairs scraped back. Victor held her gaze a moment longer, something dark and calculating behind his eyes. You're making a mistake, he said. Evelyn didn't blink. Then it's mine to make. He turned and walked out. Helen followed, her expression unreadable. One by one the others filed out, leaving Marcus and Evelyn alone in the suddenly cavernous room. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I didn't mean to cause trouble. Evelyn sank back into her chair, exhaustion crashing over her. You didn't, she replied. They did. She looked up at him, her eyes fierce despite the tremor in her hands. They want you to doubt yourself. Don't. Marcus hesitated. They're not wrong about one thing, he admitted. I've never done this before. Evelyn smiled, tired but certain. Neither had I, she said. And I built an empire. She reached out, gripping his hand briefly firmly. They don't get to decide your worth, not today, not ever. As Marcus left the conference room, the tension still buzzing in his veins, he knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just a job anymore, it was a fight. And whether he was ready or not, the system had drawn its line. The first real test came faster than Marcus expected. On his second week at Hartman Industries, he was handed the keys to a project most people had quietly written off as impossible. The original Hartman building on the south side, built in 1891, abandoned for nearly a decade, its brickwork cracked, its interior gutted by time and neglect. Previous teams had proposed demolition. Others suggested selling the land. Marcus walked through it alone the first morning, dust rising around his boots, sunlight cutting through broken windows, and he didn't see a problem. He saw potential, he saw bones that were still strong. By the end of that week, he was working 16-hour days. Mornings started with blueprints spread across his desk. Evenings ended with him on site, running his hands along old beams, tapping walls, listening the way his uncle had taught him when he was a teenager learning the trade. Engineers came and went, offering theories and calculations. Marcus listened, nodded, then showed them where the structure had settled naturally over a century, where stress points were expected, where modern fixes would destroy what made the building special. Slowly, reluctantly, they started listening back. He built his team differently too. Instead of pulling only from the usual resumes, Marcus went to community centers, trade schools, even job boards in neighborhoods the company had never recruited from. Young men and women showed up who had never worn a hard hat before, but had worked their whole lives with their hands. One of them was Jamal, 19, fresh out of high school, supporting his younger siblings. Another was Renee, a single mother who had learned basic carpentry from her grandfather. Marcus trained them personally, patient, firm, demanding excellence without ever talking down to them. This isn't just a job, he told them. This is work that lasts longer than we do. Word spread quickly on the site. The Hartman building stopped being a problem and started becoming a point of pride. Work moved faster than projected. Costs came in under budget. When inspectors raised concerns, Marcus walked them through every decision, every choice grounded in history and practicality. Even the skeptics couldn't deny the results. Helen Moore visited one afternoon, heels clicking awkwardly against the concrete floor, designer coat pulled tight against the cold. She didn't say much at first, just watched. Finally she exhaled. "I didn't think you could do this," she admitted. "Neither did they," Marcus replied, not unkindly. Helen nodded once. "I was wrong." While the building came back to life, Evelyn grew quieter. Marcus noticed it in small ways at first. She missed a site visit she had insisted on attending. Her emails came later at night, shorter, more carefully typed. When she did appear, her hands shook more noticeably, her grip on the cane weaker, her smile forced a little longer than necessary. Once Marcus caught her standing alone by the window in her office, steadying herself against the glass, breathing through a wave of dizziness, before turning back to the room like nothing had happened. She never complained, not once. When Marcus suggested postponing a meeting, she waved him off. "I've postponed enough things in my life," she said. "This isn't one of them." But the worry settled in his chest anyway. He thought of Lily, of how she watched Evelyn closely now, how she always made sure a chair was nearby, how she handed her napkins before she had to ask. Children noticed everything. 3 months in, the numbers told a story no one could argue with. The Hartman Building restoration was ahead of schedule. The apprenticeship program had doubled in size. 2 of Marcus's trainees had already been offered full-time positions within the company. Press started calling. Articles ran about the unexpected revival of a forgotten landmark. Marcus was invited to speak at a small industry panel, then another. Each time he wore the same calm confidence, talking about craftsmanship, opportunity and respect for work that couldn't be rushed. Victor Lang was not impressed. He questioned every invoice, demanded extra reports, showed up unannounced to the site more than once. "You're moving too fast," he said during one visit, clipboard in hand. "Fast is different from efficient," Marcus replied, standing his ground. Victor's eyes flicked toward Jamal and Renee working nearby. "And this program of yours," he added, "it's unconventional." Marcus didn't flinch. "It's working." Victor said nothing more, but his silence was heavier than words. The night Marcus found out Evelyn had been hospitalized, the building was nearly complete. He got the call from her assistant just after midnight. "Low blood pressure. Exhaustion. Observation overnight. She didn't want you to know," the assistant said. Marcus sat in his truck for a long time after hanging up, hands resting on the steering wheel, anger and fear tangling in his chest. The next morning, he went straight to her apartment. Evelyn looked smaller in the hospital bed, color drained from her face, hands trembling even at rest. She smiled when she saw him. "You should be at work," she said. Marcus shook his head. "You should be resting," he replied. They stared at each other for a moment, both stubborn, both unwilling to give ground. "They're pushing you too hard," he said finally. "This isn't worth your health." Evelyn's smile faded, replaced by something fiercer. "It is," she said. "It's the first thing in years that is." He wanted to argue, wanted to insist, but he saw the truth in her eyes. This wasn't killing her, it was keeping her alive. He nodded slowly. "Then let me finish it," he said. "Let me make it worth it." Evelyn reached out, gripping his hand with surprising strength. "I already know you will," she said. By the time Evelyn returned home, thinner but determined, the Hartman Building stood transformed, brick cleaned and restored, original beams reinforced, modern systems hidden carefully behind history instead of replacing it. Accessibility built in from the ground up, not added as an afterthought. When Marcus walked through the finished space alone the night before the final inspection, he felt something close to awe, not pride alone, responsibility. He thought of Lily, asleep at home, of Evelyn watching from the sidelines with hands that shook but eyes that never wavered, of every door that had been closed in his face before this one opened. The system had doubted him, tried to break him. Instead it had given him something to fight against, and as the lights came on inside the restored building, illuminating work that spoke louder than any credential, Marcus knew the hardest part wasn't proving them wrong. It was making sure Evelyn lived long enough to see just how right she had been. Victor Lang waited until the building was nearly finished before he made his move. He didn't do it in a meeting or over email. He showed up in person, late afternoon, when the site was quieter, and most of the crew had already clocked out. Marcus was reviewing final inspection notes when he saw Victor step through the temporary doors, his expensive coat out of place against dust and exposed brick. The sight alone tightened something in Marcus's chest. He knew instinctively this wasn't a congratulatory visit. "Mr. Reed," Victor said, clipboard tucked under his arm, voice smooth, almost friendly. "Walk with me." Marcus hesitated, then nodded, setting the papers down. They moved slowly through the restored corridor, past walls that now stood straight and clean, past ramps and widened doorways Marcus had fought to include. Victor's shoes echoed sharply against the floor. "Impressive work," Victor said at last. "Better than I expected." Marcus didn't answer. Compliments from men like Victor always came with conditions. They stopped near a window overlooking the street. Snow had begun to fall again, light this time. Victor turned to face him. "Let's talk about Evelyn," he said. Marcus's jaw tightened. "What about her?" Victor sighed, the sound heavy with rehearsed concern. "She collapsed again last week. 2 nights in the hospital. You know that." Marcus did know. He'd been trying not to think about it. "She's pushing herself too hard." Victor continued. "Fighting battles she doesn't need to fight. Especially for you." Marcus felt the anger rise fast and hot. "I didn't ask her to," he said. "No," Victor agreed. "But she's doing it anyway. Defending your position, defending these programs. Every time the board questions it she pushes back. And it's costing her." He paused, letting the words sink in. "If you really care about her you'll step aside." The world seemed to tilt slightly. "Step aside," Marcus repeated. "Resign," Victor said plainly. "Take the win, you've proven your point. The building's done. Walk away and let Evelyn rest. Let the company return to stability." Marcus stared at him, disbelief turning quickly into fury. "So this is about control," he said. Victor didn't deny it. "This is about survival," he corrected. "Yours and hers." Marcus shook his head slowly. "You're using her health to push me out." Victor's expression hardened. "I'm stating facts. She won't last long like this. And when she's gone you'll have no protection here. No one left to shield you from reality." He leaned in slightly. "Think about your daughter. About what happens to you when the board decides you were a mistake." With that Victor turned and walked away, leaving Marcus alone in the building he had poured everything into. Marcus didn't remember the drive home. His mind replayed Victor's words on a loop, each one landing harder than the last. By the time he reached his apartment, the weight of it sat heavy in his chest. Lily was already home, sprawled on the couch under a blanket, coloring while the neighbor watched her. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "Daddy," she said, immediately noticing his face. "You look sad." "I'm just tired," Marcus replied automatically, hanging up his coat. Lily wasn't convinced. She studied him the way she always did when something felt off. Later after dinner, after the neighbor left, Marcus tucked Lily into bed. She was quieter than usual, her energy softened by the late hour. "Daddy," she said sleepily, "are you mad at Grandma Evelyn?" Marcus froze. "Why would you think that?" "Because you didn't smile when I talked about her today," Lily said. "And you always smile when I talk about her." Marcus sat on the edge of the bed, rubbing his hands together. "Grandma Evelyn is sick," he said carefully. Lily's eyes widened, like Mommy was. The question hit him like a punch. He swallowed. "Not the same," he said. "But she's tired. And some people think I should leave my job so she can rest." Lily was quiet for a moment, processing. Then she said, "Did she tell you that?" "No," Marcus admitted. "Someone else did." Lily frowned, her small face serious. "Mommy used to say something when people told her what to do," she said. "What did she say?" Marcus asked softly. Lily closed her eyes, thinking hard. She said, "Don't let other people's fear make you small." The words landed with unexpected force. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Sarah had said that, more than once, usually after a hard day at work, usually when she was trying to be brave for both of them. Lily opened her eyes again. "Are you being small, Daddy?" The question wasn't accusatory, it was honest. Marcus didn't answer right away. He lay awake long after Lily fell asleep, staring at the ceiling thinking about Evelyn in that hospital bed, about Victor's calm cruelty, about the fragile balance between doing the right thing and doing the easy thing. He thought about walking away, about saving Evelyn the stress, about returning to a simpler life where no one watched his every move. And then he thought about what that would teach Lily. By morning he had made his decision. He dropped Lily off at school, kissed her forehead longer than usual, then drove straight to Evelyn's penthouse. She opened the door herself, looking thinner, paler, her hands shaking visibly as she steadied herself against the frame. "You shouldn't be up," Marcus said immediately. "Neither should you be here," she replied, stepping aside to let him in. They sat in the same chairs where she had offered him the job weeks earlier. The city stretched out beyond the windows, gray and restless. "Victor came to see me," Marcus said without preamble. Evelyn closed her eyes briefly. "I know," she said. "He came to see me too." Marcus's chest tightened. "Then you know what he said?" Evelyn nodded. "He wants you gone. He thinks sacrificing you will buy me time." Marcus leaned forward. "Then I'll resign," he said. The words hurt coming out, but he forced them anyway. "I won't be the reason your health gets worse." Evelyn's eyes snapped open. "No," she said sharply. "Absolutely not." "Evelyn, listen to me," Marcus insisted. "This isn't about pride. You're collapsing. You're exhausted. They're using you to fight their battles." She leaned forward as much as her body allowed, anger flaring. "And you think leaving fixes that?" she demanded. "You think giving them exactly what they want makes this better?" Her hands shook violently now, but her voice didn't waver. "Marcus, I spent my whole life choosing the safe option, the easy option, and it cost me everything that mattered." She gestured weakly around the room. "You walking away doesn't save me. It kills the last thing that's given me purpose." He stared at her, torn. "I can't be the reason you be." "You're not," she cut in. "You're the reason I'm still here." The words hung between them, raw and unfiltered. She took a breath, steadying herself. "Watching you fight, watching you build something honest, watching you give people chances the system denied you, that's what keeps me going. If I stop now, if I let them win, then everything I regret stays true." Marcus rubbed his face, overwhelmed. "What if I fail?" he asked quietly. "What if all of this is for nothing?" Evelyn smiled, tired but fierce. "Then you fail," she said, "and you get back up. That's life. I didn't build this company by never failing. I built it by refusing to quit." She reached for his hand, her grip weak but determined. "Don't let them turn my last good decision into another regret." Silence stretched between them. Marcus thought of Lily's words, of Sarah's voice, of the building standing proud because he hadn't listened when people told him it couldn't be done. He nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "I won't resign." Evelyn exhaled, relief washing over her face. "But you have to promise me something," he added. "You take care of yourself. No more collapsing, no more hiding it." She nodded. "Deal." As Marcus stood to leave, his phone rang. The school. Lily had a fever. He promised he'd be there in minutes. That night, he sat beside Lily's bed, pressing a cool cloth to her forehead. "Daddy," she murmured, half asleep. "Are you being brave?" Marcus swallowed hard. "I'm trying," he said. Lily smiled faintly. "Mommy would like that." Marcus stayed up all night watching over his daughter, thinking about courage and sacrifice, and the kind of man he wanted to be. By morning Lily's fever had broken. She demanded pancakes. Marcus smiled for the first time in hours. He texted Evelyn one simple message before heading to work. "I'm staying. We'll finish this together." The reply came almost instantly. "Thank you. You already have." The choice had been made. There was no turning back now. And for the first time Marcus understood that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was choosing to stand your ground anyway, even when the cost was real, even when the outcome wasn't guaranteed. The morning of the reopening arrived cold and bright, the kind of late November day that made the city feel sharp and awake. Marcus reached the Hartman building before sunrise, standing across the street for a moment just to take it in. The brick facade glowed softly under the new lights, restored but not polished into something unrecognizable. It looked like it belonged to the neighborhood again, like it had remembered who it was. People began arriving early, city officials, journalists, preservation groups, employees who had doubted him once and now walked with a different kind of curiosity. Marcus adjusted his jacket and breathed through the familiar mix of pride and nerves. This wasn't just a building opening, this was a reckoning. Inside, final preparations were underway. Banners hung neatly, chairs filled the central hall where sunlight streamed through restored windows that hadn't let in light for decades. Jennifer, his assistant, hurried over with a clipboard. "We're almost ready," she said, excitement barely contained. "And there's someone here asking for you." She stepped aside, revealing a man standing just behind her, tall, well-dressed, with Evelyn's eyes. Marcus recognized him instantly, though they had never met. "You must be Marcus," the man said, extending his hand. "I'm Daniel Hartman, Evelyn's son." They shook hands. Daniel looked around the space, taking it all in slowly. "It's beautiful," he said, and there was something in his voice that sounded like regret. "My mother told me about the project, but I didn't understand what it meant until now." Marcus nodded. "She had a clear vision," he said. "I just helped carry it out." Daniel's mouth tightened. "She said you did more than that," he replied. "She said you gave her a reason to keep fighting." Before Marcus could respond, movement at the entrance drew their attention. Evelyn arrived quietly. No grand announcement, no entourage. She wasn't in her wheelchair. She walked slowly with her cane, each step deliberate, painful, but hers. Lily spotted her first and broke free from Marcus's side, running toward her. "Grandma Evelyn," she called, throwing her arms around Evelyn's waist. Evelyn laughed, breathless but radiant. "Look at you," she said. "You're getting taller every time I see you." Marcus felt his throat tighten as he watched her, standing there in the middle of everything she had fought to preserve, held upright by will alone. Daniel stepped forward hesitantly. "Mom," he said. Evelyn froze for half a second, then opened her arms. He crossed the space and hugged her, both of them holding on longer than anyone expected, years of distance collapsing in a single moment. The ceremony began on time. The mayor spoke first, then representatives from the Historical Society, each praising the restoration, the speed, the respect for the building's history. Marcus listened from the side, barely hearing the words. His eyes stayed on Evelyn, seated now in the front row. Lily perched proudly beside her. When Evelyn was introduced, the room rose to its feet. Marcus moved instinctively toward her, but she waved him back. She stood on her own, cane trembling in her grip, applause washing over her like a tide. "I've spent most of my life building things," Evelyn began, her voice steady despite the visible effort it took to stand there. "Buildings, companies, a reputation." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the crowd. "I told myself that was enough, that success would fill the spaces where people should have been." She paused, letting the truth of that land. It didn't. She spoke of the accident, of loss, of regret, not in detail, but plainly, honestly. She spoke of sitting alone on Christmas night, believing her life had narrowed to pain and memory, until a little girl reminded her of something she had forgotten. The crowd laughed softly when Lily waved from her seat. Evelyn's eyes found Marcus. "6 months ago," she continued, "I hired a man the system had rejected over and over again. Not because he lacked skill, but because he lacked permission." A murmur rippled through the room. "He didn't ask for favors. He didn't ask to be saved. He asked for a chance. And then he earned it." She gestured toward the building around them. This restoration was finished early, under budget. More importantly, it created opportunities for people who would never have been invited into this room otherwise. Her voice grew stronger. "This is what legacy looks like. Not control, not titles, but courage, and the willingness to open doors instead of guarding them." She turned fully toward Marcus then. "Marcus Reed didn't just restore this building, he restored my faith, in people, in purpose, in family." The applause was thunderous. Marcus felt it hit him all at once. The release of months of tension, the validation he had never expected to feel in a place like this. He wiped his eyes quickly, not caring who saw. Lily clapped the loudest of all. Evelyn stepped down from the podium carefully, Daniel moving to support her, but she didn't lean on him. She went straight to Marcus. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for believing in me when it would have been easier not to." Marcus shook his head. "You believed first," he replied. As the crowd began to disperse, Daniel lingered. "I owe you an apology," he said to Marcus. "I wasn't there when my mother needed me. I told myself she didn't care, that she didn't notice." He swallowed. "I was wrong." Marcus nodded. "Families miss each other sometimes," he said simply. What matters is showing up when it counts. Daniel looked toward Evelyn and Lily laughing together. You gave her back something I thought was gone, he said. Thank you. By the time the last guests left, the building felt different. Not quieter, but settled. Like something had been set right. Marcus stood in the main hall with Lily, watching Evelyn and Daniel talk softly nearby. Lily slipped her hand into his. Daddy, she whispered, we did it. Marcus smiled down at her. We did. He felt the weight lift, the long fight easing into something like peace. Outside, people snapped photos of the building, unaware of how close it had come to never standing again, unaware of the battles fought inside boardrooms and hearts to make this day possible. Marcus looked back one last time before heading out, the light catching on restored brick and open doors. The system had pushed back hard. It had tried to win. Instead, it had been forced to make room. And in that space something rare had happened. Justice didn't shout. It didn't demand applause. Meeting tort. It didn't demand applause. It simply stood there, solid and undeniable, in the form of a building restored, a family reunited, and a future rewritten. The apartment felt different that night. When Marcus and Lily arrived at Evelyn's penthouse for Thanksgiving, the space that had once echoed with silence was alive with sound. Laughter spilled down the hallway. Dishes clinked. Someone argued lightly about whether the rolls were burning. Evelyn sat at the head of the table in her wheelchair, a soft blanket over her legs, her hands trembling more than usual as she lifted her glass, but her eyes were bright, alert, fully present. Daniel stood nearby with his wife, helping their children set plates, moving awkwardly at first, as if unsure he was allowed to take up space here, until Evelyn caught his eye and smiled in a way that made it clear he belonged. For a long moment Marcus stood back and simply watched. Lily ran between chairs, laughing, showing everyone how she could play a song on the piano now. The same piano that once sat untouched in a room too quiet to breathe in. The penthouse no longer felt like a monument to success. It felt like a home. And that realization hit Marcus harder than he expected. Dinner passed slowly, intentionally. Stories replaced small talk. Evelyn listened more than she spoke, nodding, smiling, her gaze lingering on each face as if memorizing the moment. When her hands shook too badly to cut her food, Lily noticed before anyone else and quietly helped, just as she had in the restaurant months earlier. No one commented, no one rushed her. Time finally seemed willing to wait. Later, when the plates were cleared, and the kids disappeared into the living room with markers and paper, Evelyn raised her glass again. The room fell quiet. Last Christmas, she said, her voice thinner now, but steady. I truly believed my life was over. I was alone, in pain, and convinced that everything meaningful was behind me. She paused, breathing carefully, and then two people walked into my life and reminded me that I was wrong. Her eyes found Marcus and Lily. Family isn't about blood or history, it's about showing up. It's about choosing each other, especially when it's inconvenient or unexpected. She lifted her glass higher, to second chances, and to the families we choose. To second chances, everyone echoed. Marcus felt his chest tighten, emotion rising fast and unfiltered. He caught Lily watching Evelyn with complete devotion, her small face serious, protective. Something ancient and gentle settled in him. This was what healing looked like. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. The weeks that followed passed quickly. Winter settled in deeper, and Evelyn grew weaker. The doctors were honest this time. Cancer, advanced. There were treatments but no promises. Evelyn took the news with the same calm resolve she had carried through boardrooms and battles. I'm not afraid, she told Marcus one evening, as they sat by the window, city lights blinking below. I'm grateful, that's new for me. Marcus didn't know what to say, so he stayed. That seemed to be enough. Christmas came again, quieter this time. Evelyn spent most of it by the window, wrapped in a sweater Lily had picked out herself, dozing in and out as the apartment filled with soft music and low voices. When Lily approached her with a folded piece of paper clutched tightly in her hands, Evelyn opened her eyes. I made you something, Lily said, crawling carefully into her lap. Evelyn smiled and opened it. It was a drawing. Stick figures holding hands. Marcus, Daniel, the children, and in the center a woman in a wheelchair, drawn carefully, deliberately, with shaking hands mirrored by crayon lines that didn't quite stay straight. At the bottom, in careful letters, Lily had written, "Family is love. Merry Christmas." Evelyn pressed the paper to her chest, tears spilling freely now, unguarded. "It's perfect," she whispered. Later that night, after the apartment had gone quiet, Marcus sat at the kitchen table and opened an envelope that had been waiting for him. Inside was a letter and a final statement from the medical billing company that had haunted him for years. Balance paid in full. A handwritten note followed, unmistakably Evelyn's. "No one should carry that kind of burden alone. You earned this, don't argue." Marcus covered his face with his hands and cried, not from sadness, but from relief so deep it felt like gravity had shifted. Evelyn passed peacefully. Early the following spring, the city just beginning to thaw. She wasn't alone. Marcus and Lily were there. Daniel held her hand. Her final days were filled with voices, with laughter drifting in from other rooms, with the knowledge that she had not only built something lasting, but left it in the hands of people who would protect it. At the memorial, held inside the restored Hartman building, sunlight streamed through the windows she had fought to save. Marcus stood with Lily beside him as people spoke about Evelyn's legacy. They talked about her success, her power, her influence. But the words that lingered most came from Lily, who stood on a small step stool, holding the microphone with both hands. "She was my grandma," she said simply, "and she loved people." Afterward, as the crowd thinned, Marcus walked through the building one last time, Lily's hand in his. The walls stood strong, the doors were open. Life moved through the space freely. Evelyn had been right. Buildings mattered, but people mattered more. That night back in their small apartment, Marcus tucked Lily into bed. "Daddy," she asked softly, "do you think Grandma Evelyn is okay?" Marcus smiled, brushing her hair back. "I do," he said. "I think she finally has everything she wanted." Lily nodded, satisfied, and drifted off to sleep. Marcus stood by the window, looking out at the city, thinking about a snowy Christmas night, a trembling hand, a brave little girl who refused to walk past loneliness. Life hadn't become easy. The world hadn't suddenly turned fair, but something had changed. And sometimes that was enough. Nobody should be alone. And because of one unexpected choice, none of them ever truly were again. If you want more emotional, heartwarming stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the YouTube channel, where stories of kindness, healing, and second chances come to life through powerful narration. Follow for more touching stories that stay with you long after the video ends. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story that might just change someone's day. Thank you for reading. See you in the next story.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.